Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Martinsville Speedway, the paperclip track, the weekend of the elimination round of the round of 8. This weekend we had 8 drivers coming into Martinsville, with 2 of them knowing they were already locked into the championship 4, with 6 others fighting for just 2 spots. At the end of the day, one of those drivers that entered the race above the cutoff line locked up his spot with a victory, while the other one barely held on. Let's get into all that went down yesterday at the paperclip. Number 1, Ryan Blaney, YRB, standing for Young Ryan Blaney, captured his 3rd win of the season, his first multi-win season with 3 wins in total in a season, winning yesterday's Xfinity 500 at Martinsville Speedway, beating out Aric Almirola, Denny Hamlin, Chase Briscoe, and Joey Logano for the victory, and locking himself into his first ever championship 4 spot. What a day it was for that 12 team and Ryan Blaney. Entering the race 10 points above the cutoff line, they know they needed to come out of this race with a solid run and some solid stage points. At the beginning of the race, the car was a rocket ship. The discount tire Ford was flying all around the track in a good way, for one thing, making the right moves, running the right lanes, catching guys when his car was better than theirs, and had good tire management all race long. They had great track position in their hands for the most part of the race. They were end up finishing second at the end of stage 1, behind Denny Hamlin, and then stage 2, it was pretty much a battle of who was going to be better than who in the long run, and Ryan Blaney had a really good car at the end of stage 2 and ended up taking the stage win, earning himself 19 points, which was the same amount that Denny Hamlin had, actually, but those points were enough to help him still extend the cushion over the cutoff line between those that he was racing against. In the final stage, he was battling really hard all those restarts that they had with the 11 car Denny Hamlin. There were so many good battles between those two for the race lead on the track yesterday. It was just so much fun. It had you on the edge of your seat. Me in person at the track, I was on the edge of my seat watching those guys. I thought for sure there was going to be some moments those guys were going to collide together and take one another out and ultimately eliminate both of them or one of them from a championship 4 spot. But they raced each other hard and clean all race long when they were battling each other for the race lead, and it was just so perfect. And then the end of the race, we had a long green flag stint, was a 160 plus laps on the day. At the end of the day, Ryan Blaney restarted in the middle of the pack because some guys opted to stay out. He was one of the cars that came in and got tires. When he eventually got by the 11 car Denny Hamlin, he started picking off guys one by one when we continued to get into that long run, and some of those guys that stayed out on their tires were beginning to fade a little bit, and that's where Blaney was beginning to pick them off one by one. And with about 50 laps to go in the race, when he was down by at least 5.3 seconds with 80 laps to go, he took the lead from Aric Almirola and just drove away from the competition and picked up his first ever grandfather clock at Martinsville Speedway, winning again the Xfinity 500. Just did an incredible job all race long, and now he's going to be able to race for a championship next weekend. Ryan Blaney, remember, a year ago he was in the round of 8, but they didn't have the luck and the speed, particularly in that round, to have a chance to advance into the Final 4. This time, they did, and they made the right moves every single race. But just remember how the round of 8 started for Ryan Blaney. He originally finished 6th at Las Vegas, but NASCAR found that one of the parts of his car, particularly in the right front, did not meet the specific modifications in the rule book, so they disqualified him. But NASCAR looked back and they realized they made a mistake and they rescinded the penalty, giving Blaney back his spot and his points. If NASCAR kept hold of that penalty and didn't give back his spot, Ryan Blaney, well, actually, with the run, he would have been locked in, regardless. But a crazy round it's been for him. He finishes 6th, he gets disqualified, but then gets his spot back from NASCAR and has a great car last weekend at Homestead, Miami, a car that should have won the race, particularly long runs. That was their strong suit in the final stage, but he was just a little too far back from catching the 20 car Christopher Bell. But that put him up in the good spot entering this weekend in Martinsville, and he got the job done yesterday, and he's got a chance next weekend to win a Cup Series championship. A big day for Ryan Blaney, Jonathan Hassler, and the 12 team. Kudos to them and their impressive performance yesterday. Number 2, Byron hangs on. William Byron, who has been the winningest driver this year in the Cup Series with 6 wins, has advanced to the championship 4 with Ryan Blaney, the winner, and the winner from the previous 2 races, Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell. But it was not easy for William Byron. He finished 13th spot, which is pretty much where their best running position was all day yesterday. It was a struggle for the 24 car. They really struggled with the handling of the race car. They struggled with track position all race long. They just couldn't seem to get the right track position that they needed to put themselves up there with a spot where they could have possibly contended for a top 5, top 10, and still had a comfortable enough points gap over the rest of the field. Entering the race, Byron entered 30 above, but he didn't earn any stage points yesterday, and that's what pinned him way deep in the pack. But then, like other people, he was able to pick them off one by one late in the race when tires became a little bit of a factor with tire wear, and ended up coming home in the 13th spot, one lap down, but just enough to get into the championship 4 by 8 points. 8 points. That separated him from being eliminated by Denny Hamlin. Unbelievable job of the 24 team with William Byron and Rudy Fugle. And after the race, Byron got out of the car and immediately collapsed to the ground. I mean, he was exhausted and worn out from what was a trying day, perhaps one of the most trying days for William Byron and Rudy Fugle in that 24 team when they know that a spot in the championship 4 is at stake. And they were able to come out just barely, but they got the job done. It wasn't easy, but sometimes in this sport, nothing's ever easy. They worked hard, they got themselves in the spot, and the results that they had the first 2 races is what has them in the championship 4 with a chance at his first career title next weekend. I mean, again, what has been a career year for the 24 team nearly got eliminated yesterday if they didn't have a good enough finish based on how they've been running all day. It looked like they were going to finish in the top 25 because, that car was a handful and was not able to go anywhere whatsoever. They kept working on the car throughout the race, and they eventually got to the point where Byron saying, hey, I can work with this. I just need some track position. They didn't really get the track position they hoped for, but again, the top 15, with the results they had the first 2 races, they'll take that in a heartbeat, and now they get to race for a title next week. So great job by William Byron and the 24 team, just barely getting in at the conclusion of yesterday's race. Number 3, the 4 men that have been eliminated from competing for a championship next weekend in Phoenix are Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Tyler Reddick, and Chris Buescher. Let's start off first with Denny Hamlin, a guy coming into this race that everybody thought was going to be the man to beat. And he was, arguably other than Ryan Blaney yesterday, the best car. He had great long run speed. He took the lead 47 laps into the race from his teammate Martin Truex Jr. He was able to lead a lot of those laps at the end of stage 1 and captured stage 1 and was strong at the beginning of stage 2, but then we started to see Ryan Blaney surge and start putting challenges with Denny Hamlin. Again, I talked about that great racing those two had, back and forth for the lead on the long green flag runs and those restarts. They were absolutely driving hard because they know a spot in the championship 4 is at stake, and they knew the circumstances. They came in and they did it. They did everything right yesterday. They had a good car, they got the stage points, and they got a top 5. So why is Denny Hamlin eliminated? Let's go back to last week. What happened late in the race? Denny Hamlin racing with, you guessed it, Ryan Blaney for second place on the racetrack, when all of a sudden going to turn 1, Hamlin clears the 12 car, but something in the right front breaks, and he goes straight up into the outside wall, hits it hard, takes him out of the race. If Denny Hamlin didn't have that part failure last week, we're not having this discussion of him being eliminated. We're talking about him being in versus William Byron, and he would have been out. But that incident happened last week, and that's what put them behind the 8 ball entering this weekend. 17 below the cutoff line. Even with the stage win and the 9 stage points that they accumulated in both stages, still was not enough considering the 24 was just ahead by just enough. A few spots, especially with the points that he accumulated from the last 2 races, versus the 11 car that has him in the championship 4 and Denny Hamlin left out. Now, again, we've all talked about when is Denny Hamlin going to win a championship. Obviously, 2 years in a row, he doesn't make the championship 4. He is arguably one of the most talented drivers we have in NASCAR. Yes, he is controversial. He has been controversial with how he races people, with how he said a few things about some people, but that's Denny Hamlin. I mean, he, like his podcast show, he speaks his mind. Everybody's allowed to speak their mind. But sometimes he can act like a hypocrite. And what I mean by hypocrite means sometimes he doesn't really mean that, but your actions on the racetrack say differently about how you race people. Like how he raced Kyle Larson at Pocono earlier this year. At least with Joey Logano, he owns up to how he races. He races guys like he's a different person when you put on the helmet. Obviously, that's how everybody acts. When you put on the helmet, you're a whole different person than when you are outside of the race car. But Joey Logano at least owns up to being an aggressive driver, hard racing driver, and will give you crap at the end of the race when it comes down to it at the very end. Denny Hamlin sometimes likes to play, two sides. He likes to be a little two-faced. But at the end of the day, Denny Hamlin is still a talented race car driver. But folks, the clock's ticking with him in NASCAR behind the wheel, and the chances of trying to win a championship are beginning to run out. Now, again, Hamlin is still, I think, got 5-6 years left in the sport behind the wheel, but now that he's a co-owner of a race team, the time is starting to get up there and think about the decision of when to step aside and start being an owner for NASCAR instead of just doing an owner and a driver role. So we'll see what happens. Next year, Denny Hamlin's going to be trying to get that championship next year, but this year, he falls a little bit short. Then his teammate Martin Truex Jr., who qualified on the pole on Saturday, felt like this is the momentum that Martin Truex finally needs to put it all together to make it to the championship 4. And things were going their way early in the race. They had a good car. They led a lot of laps. They finished top 5 in the end of stage 1. But stage 2 is where the nail in the coffin that took out Martin Truex Jr. of a championship 4 spot. When we had a pit stop for a caution flag, I think it was for the Ryan Newman spin on the front stretch off of turn 4. Martin Truex Jr. had the last pit stall at the exit of pit road, and when he took off, he went a little too fast and got caught for speeding, and that took him out of the running for yesterday's race win, more than likely. Because again, they had a good race car, but when you get stuck back there in that traffic, and what we've seen with this next-gen car in the short tracks, particularly Martinsville, it's tough to pass back there. He was able to pass a few guys, but the more traffic he got into, the worse it got for him, and he couldn't really go anywhere. And all he could settle for was a 12th place finish, and ultimately the regular season champion will not compete in the championship 4 this year. It sucks, but Martin Truex Jr. should still be proud of a lot of things. He got back to the playoffs this year and was able to win some races, something he wasn't able to accomplish last year in 2022. And more than likely, next year, folks, could very well be the final year that we see Martin Truex Jr. behind the wheel. We don't know that. He might want to come back for another year, but we do know that Martin Truex Jr. is going to have another run at a title next year in 2024. So a grilled season for Truex, but a really lousy playoffs with all those bad runs that he had and a lot of bad luck. Then we go to Tyler Reddick, who made the championship, the round of 8 for the first time in his career. He did okay in this round of 8. Not necessarily yesterday. His car was not that good at all. They just didn't really have a lot of bonus points compared to the other guys he was racing in the round of 8, and that's kind of what hindered him. Now, a top 5 last weekend at Homestead and a top 10 the week prior at Las Vegas, those are good runs, and he came in 10 below thinking he could point his way in, and he's pretty good at Martinsville. But the car just wasn't there for him yesterday, especially deep in all that traffic. They couldn't pass much. They were able to get to the top 10 one-point strategy, but once they lost their strategy and the track position, it just was so tough for them, and he had to settle for a 26th place finish and ultimately will not compete for a title. But still a lot of positives for Tyler Reddick in his first year with 23-11. They did some good things, and I expect them to have an even better year next year. And finally, Chris Buescher, a feel-good story this year. A man who got to victory lane 3 times, bringing RFK back to the top and being competitive, running top 5, top 10 on a consistent basis this year with his teammate and team owner, Brad Keselowski. He came in absolutely in a must-win, and they did not have the car at the beginning of the race whatsoever to compete for the win. They got in the top 5 a little bit later in the race, but then the tires began to fall off, and they slipped back and finished in the 8th spot, which ultimately was the you're done point for Chris Buescher being in the championship 4 again. He needed to win. He didn't get the job done, but still, like Tyler Reddick, a lot of positives to take away from Chris Buescher and RFK this season. They had a great year, and I guarantee you next year, they're going to be back hungrier than ever to try to take that step forward. RFK is getting better, folks. They're going to have a big year in 2024 next year. But those are the 4 men that ultimately see their championship chances go away after yesterday's race. They gave it their best. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on their side. Number 4, almost winning, Aric Almirola. Aric Almirola nearly won this race yesterday. On Saturday, he announced that he will not be returning to Stewart-Haas Racing next year in 2024, and ultimately Smithfield announced that they would not be coming back to NASCAR at all next year. Rumor has it that Almirola is possibly going to go part-time racing in Xfinity next year for Joe Gibbs Racing. He says he's done racing full-time in Cup, but he's not necessarily retiring like he said he was going to last year, and then he said, I'm coming back. Things have not really been good for Almirola this year. It's been a little struggle for them, but yesterday he put together his best race of the season aside from the night race at Daytona about a month and a half ago. He was really, really good all day long, running inside the top 10, got some track position late in the race, and took the lead from some of the cars that were staying out on old tires and trying to save as much fuel as possible, like Chase Elliott. Almirola took the lead, and it looked like he was going to drive away with the victory. But Ryan Blaney kept closing those last few laps of the race because he had fresher tires and a little more speed than the 10 car did. But even though it sucks that Almirola is not able to get the victory, this is still a great run for the 10 team and an organization that's kind of taken a step down this year from where they've been the last couple years, Stewart Haas Racing. Hopefully there are better things for them in 2024 and next year, but Aric Almirola, so close to victory yesterday, but a great performance for him. He's got one more race left for the team next week. Let's hope he ends on a high note. And it'll be pretty nice if he could end maybe with a win. It'd be pretty cool, but a good run by Aric Almirola and the 10 team yesterday. And number 5, the racing at Martinsville. How would I characterize it, especially being there in person? Well, I mean, there were guys trying the upper lane on a lot of those restarts, which seemed to benefit a lot of guys that tried it. But for the most part, again, it's relatively tough to pass with this next-gen car on the short track yesterday. We expected to be a little bit more beaten and banging than we had hoped. We did have some, but not a whole lot like I hoped we would have. We had a couple of incidents in the race, like Ty Gibbs getting bumped by the 22 of Joey Logano going into turn 3. 54 went around and then got doored by the 99 of Daniel Suarez and the 6-car Brad Keselowski, and pretty much hurt Ty Gibbs' race the rest of the day. And actually finished in the top 20 with that car. I cannot believe it. Other than that, it was just a couple of spins. We had a little wreck at the first stage with Alex Bowman, Austin Dillon, and Harrison Burton, but other than that, it was just basically a relatively calm team race. The long green flag run at the end was very interesting, though, between the guys that opted to stay out and hope for a caution to get themselves in sync with everybody else. Chase Elliott was one of those guys. He stayed out, led a lot of laps after a nice brief battle for the lead with Corey LaJoie, was pulling away, and then we got into a little long green run where the tires began to fade. He faded back. Almirola took the lead, and then here comes Ryan Blaney on those fresh tires, and the desire to try to get up there and win the race, which he ended up doing. I mean, the long green flag run at the end, we saw comers and goers, especially when those guys that were short on fuel, like the 9, the 7, and the 43 of Eric Jones, they eventually did have to come down pit road, put in fuel and tires. They were able to pass a few more guys at the end, but it just wasn't enough to get a top 10 or anything. They really wanted a caution. I really was expecting a caution late in the race. I'm surprised how clean they ran the rest of the race, and the tire wear did play a little bit of a factor at the end of the day between who ended up winning and who made the championship for. But it was a relatively tame race yesterday. The ending with between who was going to get in and who wasn't going to make the championship for was very intriguing. I enjoyed it a lot yesterday. And I also want to say, as a guy, again, I did some clips at the track yesterday at Martinsville. I should have that on a vlog later this week. I enjoyed my first experience in Martinsville. It's definitely a track to go to. Obviously, my first time I was a little unfamiliar with the area, but I was able to find a few places that I wanted to go to post-race, particularly the merchandise hall, which I didn't know was all the way in turn 4 when somebody said it was over in turn 3. I got that wrong, but I was able to find those merchandise haulers. A good venue outside the track, a really good track to go to, and I look forward to being there again down the road. That definitely was not my only time in Martinsville, folks. I'm going to be going there again someday. Might be back there next fall for the elimination race for Cup and Xfinity. I mean, after what I saw in Saturday's Xfinity race, how can I not go to that race? That thing was so intense on Saturday, watching that crazy battle for the win at the end of the day. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the last race of the season is this upcoming weekend. One race, 4 drivers, 1 title on the line. Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, William Byron, and Ryan Blaney will be duking it out for 500 miles in the desert next week in Phoenix. Kyle Larson has won a Cup championship. The other 3 have not won a championship. One has been in the championship before, and that was Christopher Bell a year ago. William Byron and Ryan Blaney, this is their first time ever competing in the championship for this upcoming weekend. One of those drivers will emerge victorious. One could be called a 2-time champion. The other 3 have a chance to become a NASCAR Cup Series champion. And William Byron has the chance to make history. If he can win this Cup championship next Sunday, he would be the first driver to win a championship in the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, like he did in 2017. No, wait, excuse me, hold the phone. William Byron did not win the Truck Championship. My apologies, I forgot about that. William Byron is not the first driver to win all championship in all 3 series, because his 1 year in 2016 he won all the races but didn't make the Final Four because he blew up in Phoenix, and that was a race to get into the Final Four. So my apologies for that. But those 4 drivers next weekend, Larson, Bell, Byron, Blaney, they have a chance to be a Cup champion next week. 3 of them have a chance to be a champion for the first time, Larson has a chance to be a 2-time Cup champion. So who will emerge victorious next week with the Bill France Cup? We will find out, and I cannot wait to see the last race of the season and also the final race in the Cup Series for Eric Almirola behind the wheel of the 10 car, and the final ride for the man driving that number 4 car. We thank him for all he's done, Kevin Harvick. It'll be a emotional but happy race next weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Harvick and Almirola close their tenures in the Cup Series and who will emerge victorious as our 2023 NASCAR Cup champion. So I hope you all have a wonderful week and you enjoy this final weekend of racing for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series in the desert at Phoenix. So subscribe, like, congrats once again to Ryan Blaney and the 12 team on the win at Martinsville yesterday, and congrats to the 4 drivers, the 5, the 20, the 24, and the 12 on making it to the championship 4 in Phoenix. And I wish them all the best of luck chasing a championship next weekend. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!